Okay, all right, so let's go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody to the Ask the Oracle Service Cloud Experts event held by CPI. And what I want to do is just to go through a couple of housekeeping items just to allow you guys to have a little bit more of an interactive experience. One of the difficulties of a presentation in this way is, to try to have a back and forth, especially with such a large group of people. So at the top of the display, you're actually going to see a link. It says ask a question and then there's a little Google link that you should see right there. So if you guys can go to this link, what it will actually give you is it'll give you a view of all the questions that are submitted by anybody that's on this call that's using this link right now. And what this will enable us to do is this will enable us to see the questions as you guys are submitting them live, and also it'll give us a chance to kind of have them. The one thing that you'll also see is that you'll see a little thumbs up and a little thumbs down. If you so please, you can certainly go ahead and give one of these questions a thumbs up, and all that will do is it'll push it up higher in the list. So if it's a question you wanted to ask but somebody already beat you to it, give them a thumbs up, and then it'll become a more popular question. So with that said, I'm going to leave the link up at the top of the page. As I mentioned, anybody at any time can go to that link, submit your question, and then we'll get to that at the end of our presentation. So with that said, let's get started. All right, so my name is Derek Chen. You can see my email address right there. I actually head up the CX.Solutions team for CPI, and I'll be leading today's presentation. So as we kind of promised here, what we're going to talk about is essentially the Oracle Service Cloud Update 17D. I think just to premise what it is that we actually want to accomplish during this call, we're not going to go through this in terms of every single detail of the update. I certainly don't want to bore you with kind of regurgitating what Oracle has already shared. However, I think from our perspective, we always felt it to be useful to give a little bit of insight as to why it might be important. And then certainly from our perspective, we always like to share our thoughts about why it might be interesting for your group, and certainly we can ask any or answer any questions that you guys have coming up. So with that said, we're going to go through a couple of highlights, and specifically, we've picked out a couple of pieces that we certainly want to call out. So here, the first couple of items that we have is best answers. So in the normal console, you're able to identify best answers, and essentially this is you allowing your agents to tag an answer or in an incident as a best answer, so that when you go back and you formulate your own formalized answers, you're able to identify which ones worked the best and actually provided the best solution. So that solution is now available on the agent browser user interface, so for some of you that may be great news. For others that may not affect you, but certainly in the realm of getting to use the agent browser user interface in a more interactive way certainly makes it a little bit more viable, with options like best answer. Also, kind of related to that is the ability to propose an incident as an answer, and very similar to as it exists in the console, you're able to tag an answer to say, yes, I would like to go ahead and make this submission as a proposed answer, so that whoever's doing the knowledge-based review can actually go through this. They can come up with, whichever formulated language, whatever, fits the best format for whom you'd like it to be for. And so now we can also do that through the browser user interface. So, as I was kind of mentioning, these two features, we felt that was kind of something that was interesting, especially from the perspective of, really seeing that Oracle's putting some energy around the agent browser user interface. And I think more importantly, giving you guys, the end customer, more options as to how you want to approach utilizing Service Cloud, whether it's from the console or from the agent browser user interface. Okay, the next thing, and this is kind of in a geeky way, I'm actually really excited about this, is workflows being available through the browser user interface. And what I mean by this is that, for those of you who have workflows already available, what we can do now is actually utilize the browser user interface. Before you weren't able to, so it was essentially whatever workspace you had was what you were kind of relegated to use. Now you can do very, very similar things. So this new feature actually supports things like decisions. You can set fields. You can create new objects and swap out workspaces, use connector elements. So essentially, most of the functionality that allows you to really customize this in a much deeper way than you were before. So that's certainly exciting, especially if you do have a workflow currently for your console users that you were never able to use for your browser user interface users. So now, essentially, you should be able to kind of cross over a little bit more easily, so that at least they'll have a similar experience. Now, also with that, they've added the SLA runtime support to also the browser user interface. And and essentially for anybody who's not familiar with this, this allows for you to associate an SLA to any of these tickets, specifically to highlight things like your business hours and also certain requirements. So for instance, you may have an SLA associated to a normal ticket versus, say, an escalation ticket or a high priority ticket. And so this ability now offers that in the browser user interface. Once again, really opening up the capabilities that you have. And so those two experiences, the console experience and that browser user interface experience, are now much more interchangeable in the way that you can really approach how you want to design the ultimate customer experience. And the things that I'll kind of also point out is, with that, it also makes it so that you don't have to come up with your own ways to devise how you actually track the SLAs that are done in the browser user interface versus what's done in the console, which you did have to do before. So this is kind of one of those like super in the background type of items, but for those folks that are using SLAs and SLA support and also attempting to use the browser user interface, this is once again another item that certainly will be helpful. Okay, the last item here that we certainly felt some excitement around is the element manager. So this is by far and if you guys do a lot of configuration or you're creating items that need to span across multiple interfaces or even different sites, and maybe it's a test site, maybe it's an upgrade site, what have you, and you want to transfer all of these objects, what Oracle has actually added to the 17D update is this capability called the element manager, which actually enables you to lump these things together. So this is things like configuration settings, configurable components, and what you can do is package them up, export them from one site or one interface and move them to another. So for instance, if I'm, if my organization has 2, 3, 4 interfaces, this now allows me to create it in one interface and then I can put it in all 4 without having to rebuild it, configuration setting by configuration setting. So, for those folks that have those types of structures, it makes it significantly easier than having to do all these manual settings, documenting everything in one place and having to go through your checklist one by one. You can literally just import it back in, and this really should reduce the time that it's going to take to duplicate those efforts across interfaces and as I mentioned also across certain sites, whether it's a test site or whatnot. So all in all, those 5 elements, in the actual official list from Oracle, there is much more than just 5 items, but as I mentioned, the one thing that we wanted to call out were things that we certainly have heard through our customers, in terms of things that would be of interest to them, certainly features that might actually improve their experience, or features that would get them the actual ability to switch over to the browser user interface. These were the things that we thought were worthy of note. And so with that, what I would like to do is we actually did receive a couple of questions prior to, but I certainly will invite any questions, to this link above. So, as you guys come up with your questions, please go ahead, make these submissions, and we'll be able to see them here. So let me go to some questions that we already have kind of set up, and then, we'll kind of talk through them. All right, so the first question we have here is from Theresa. Are there any updates to the recommended UAT testing list? Theresa, just at a high level, no, there really aren't any new recommendations in terms of UAT testing. For the most part, anytime you go through, an upgrade from version to version, really it's going to start in the very basic things. Can you log in? Are all the users that you expect to be there? Are they still there? Are the workspaces that you expect to be there still there? In your major functionalities, are you able to create a ticket, create a contact, and are you able to utilize the site as you typically would utilize it? Now, also with that, we also would recommend looking at any type of workspace add-ins, any portal changes that you expect to be there, and then last but not least, any types of API calls that you feel are part of the everyday. We would absolutely recommend taking a look at those. Now, with all that said, once you have upgraded into 17D, the only thing that I would say that I would recommend kind of adding to your list is now with the element manager, because you're moving things in mass, it is ultra convenient. However, it is one more opportunity for things to get missed, right? Because especially if you had a really regimented checklist of things that you're doing to make sure that one instance has it, one interface has your items versus another interface, I would still recommend using that same checklist to ensure that everything is in the package. But then, that kind of gets a little bit truncated because now you're going to transport the package from one place to another. So that should make it a little bit easier. And so all in all, as I was mentioning, there aren't any, large updates to the recommended UAT testing list. But certainly after this upgrade, I would just kind of do a tweak to your routine just to make sure that although you're able to utilize the new tools, that you're not going to, in effect, create new problems because we've eliminated some other problems. So hopefully that helps you. Theresa, if you do have any follow-up questions to that, please go ahead and submit it to that link up top, and we'll go ahead and answer that. All right. There's actually another question from Theresa as well. And the question is the browser user interface relevant for non-mobile contact center? And I think this is an interesting question, considering that, this is probably a question for a lot of you. Many Oracle Service Cloud customers, most in fact, are introduced to the console first, and then, the topic of browser user interface was introduced. And so, the browser user interface was designed to be a relatively lightweight version of Service Cloud that gave you most of the functionality, but it didn't require any type of software installation. There's no installation link, and then it also allowed you to access it from any type of computer. So it didn't have to be a PC, and it doesn't have to be, set up in a certain way. For instance, it would allow you to access this from any browser. So this is mobile device, this is from desktop, laptop, anything that has a web browser that's able to navigate to this website, you're able to use it. So to your question, Theresa, is the browser user interface relevant? I think it can be. Now, there's two things that you'll want to really ask. The first thing is the type of environment that your agents are in, right? So the browser user interface is a much more lightweight version of Service Cloud. So it doesn't really have as many hardware constraints and limitations, I guess, if you want to call it that, in regards to what's required from the system resources. Because of that, it certainly does make it a little bit easier for your team to kind of go from ticket to ticket, and so it can in some ways be a lighter weight platform for them, so that they essentially have a little less dependent on what their computers are powered with. The other thing I would also that I would really also recommend taking a look at is, what's the end game for your agents? If they have a very simple workspace where there's not a lot of transitions, essentially you're just capturing data, there's absolutely no reason why you could not do browser user interface, right? So there's benefit there. And then last but not least, certainly you want to take a look at the audience, right? So, if this is an agent that's always sitting at a desktop and it's a traditional contact center environment, and there's no reason that they, there's no benefit whether it's console or it's browser, then it's kind of up to you. But maybe it might be an escalation group who doesn't always have, they're not always seated at their desk. Maybe they're out and about, maybe they're out in the field, for instance. And so, the benefit there really would be that they would have access to these tickets that are being escalated to them, no matter where they are, as long as they have something to view it through, mobile device, iPad, phone, whatever. So with those two things, those would really be the big considerations, that you may want to consider as you're weighing transitioning to the browser user interface. But this is really at this point, because there is more and more functionality. It is a little bit more even of an ability, especially when it comes to incident management. The options are a little bit more even. So hopefully that answers what you were looking for. Okay. All right. And another question that we got here was from Melanie. So can we optimize / specify our URLs in the knowledge base? And so I'm hoping that Melanie has actually joined us. I don't know if Melanie has. I'm not 100% sure which URL she's referring to. And if she has joined us, Melanie, if you have joined us, please feel free and type into the GoToMeeting chat, and we can see that, or if you want, you can certainly unmute yourself. I don't know if she's joined us. We'll give her just a couple moments here. All right. Well, I don't know if Melanie has joined us, so we'll kind of let this question kind of sit, and maybe we'll follow up with her separately. But I don't see any additional questions coming through the question link. Certainly, I can go ahead and unmute everybody here. So let's go ahead and unmute everybody. Does anybody have any questions that you'd like to share over the phone, or? All right. Well, it sounds pretty quiet here today. So, I think the one thing that we certainly want to do is, with each of these Ask the Expert sessions, we want to really make this, really about your questions and more about things that you guys are curious about. So, since we do have some time still remaining in this particular session, we'll certainly open up any other things related to the upgrade to 17D, anything, if you want to just open it up to upgrades in general, we can certainly field any of those types of questions. What we'll do, as we kind of move forward for these future Ask the Expert sessions is, we'll reach out to you guys probably a week prior to. We'll solicit some more questions from you, just to make sure that we do have a stable of questions prior to going into this. But we'll go ahead and wait just a few more moments here. So we'll see if there's any other questions, and and if you're typing into the question link, that's great. We'll see them right here.
Derek, this is Theresa.
Hey, Theresa.
Hello. Thank you for the session. It's very helpful. Thanks for getting to my questions.
No, absolutely.
Since we have an open floor, I have a more general question that I think I know the answer to.
Okay.
when we have our integrations, is there a resource, or is it within the test? It might be in the testing list to kind of give them a heads up. One of our integrations is with a pretty big company, with Genesis, and I just feel like it's always we're always retroactively updating the things that are changing to make sure API calls are happening and REST things are how they're supposed to be. So I didn't know if the bigger level communication ever occurs between the two companies.
So generally speaking, no. So that's
Yeah.
something that Oracle and Genesis will, they're hoping the customer is going to be proactive. I mean, the thing that you'll kind of know is that every quarter Oracle does release an update, and based off of your upgrade schedule, you can really dictate. Do you want to get every single update that happens every quarter? Are you guys planning to just pick up maybe 2 of the upgrades? You don't actually have to sign up for every single one. The very, very absolute minimum that we certainly recommend, and Oracle recommends, is to at least get an upgrade once every 2 years. In our best practice, we would certainly recommend more frequently than that, but that's kind of the guideline. So, based on whatever plan that you set up, then you'll get a feel for when these upgrades come out. We can certainly help you guys with that in terms of kind of getting an idea of at least the month that they're going to be coming out. And then, you can reach out to Genesis, give them a heads up to say, hey, here's the timing of what we're thinking. And, this is when we expect to go through this exercise. And in that way, you can be a little bit more proactive, I think, but more importantly, to be able to kind of plan out these things, months in advance versus, I think, to your point, reacting to it, once something bad has happened.
Perfect. That's kind of what I figured. Thank you.
Okay. Great question. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, it does not appear that there are any other questions that have been submitted to the question link. Oh, sorry. There is one question here. Okay, so there's a question from William. So in 17D, have other users noticed that incidents always want to save after viewing with no changes? That's an interesting question. William, we have not actually seen. We haven't had any reports of that for many of our customers. If you wouldn't mind, William, I don't know if you're. I think you're on the phone here. Would you be able to add a little insight into the behaviors that you're seeing?
Sure, thanks. Uh, we're in the process of upgrading. I continue to delay it because of this issue. What Oracle's telling me is it's trying to update the channel ID each time we open an incident, so it always wants to know if you want to save it or not. So it's causing us quite a bit of grief, unfortunately. That's why we haven't proceeded with the upgrade yet.
That is interesting. The one question I would have is it trying to upgrade the channel? Is this through a I guess what channel is it coming through? Maybe let me ask it that way.
Both. It doesn't really matter whether it's they ask a question or email. Any incident opened, there's days I might review hundreds of incidents.
Yeah.
It always offers that save question, and it's a huge delay for management, I've got to tell you.
Yeah, we can definitely take that offline with you and maybe dig a little bit deeper. I think
Just fine. I just wondered if any other users had experienced it, because we do auto upgrades.
Yeah.
And again, we've been delaying this one for some time because of just that fact. Everything else is great, but that one little caveat with it is holding us back.
Yeah, that's definitely kind of interesting. I'm not really 100% sure if we've gotten any other reports from that, and certainly not in the way that you're kind of talking about it. I wonder if there's some other behavior behind the scenes that's actually causing that, and maybe Oracle didn't understand that.
That is possible. It's doing it on all of our interfaces, so I just wasn't sure. I hadn't seen anything from any others on it, and I just wanted to throw it out there.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that question. All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I appreciate everybody. So, this is my email address. So if you guys do have any questions, something that just pops into your head, immediately after this call, or even tomorrow, or whatever happens, please feel free. Send an email to me. It's dchin@cpi.solutions. And I'll be sure to get back to you. But with that, thank you all for joining us, and we certainly appreciate you attending. In about a month, we'll have our next Ask the Experts session, where we'll be talking through another topic. So we'll ping you probably a week prior to that, just to collect some of the questions that you may have, and we look forward to talking to you guys again. Thank you, guys.